Welcome, Bronco Nation, to my game preview for Boise State versus North Dakota. Now, Boise State not opened the season the way fans expected. They opened up the season 0-2. They're coming up against a North Dakota team, an FCS program, but an FCS program that nonetheless is 2-0. Boise State has not started a season 0-2 since 2005, and this is only the third time in the post-2000s era that Boise State has started a season off 0-2. 2001, the only other time in that post-2000s year for Boise State. This is a game that's taking place September 16th at 10 a.m. Mountain Central Time on FS1. It is the first game of the season that Boise State is favored in, given a 90.8% chance of winning. Now, like I said, 0-2, first time since 2005, first time Boise State lost a season opener at home, so a game opener on the blue. First time Boise State lost a game opener on the blue, a home opener, since 2001. So Boise State fans right now are a little angsty, to say the least. I was taken to task in my last video for being too positive in my review of this team, and I'm not going to apologize for the tone that I had in that video, because I do think that the fan base is overreacting right now. 0-2, it's bad. We're used to the golden eras. We're used to the Boise State teams that go out and go undefeated under the Kellen Moore eras, or at least come out and compete and win these openers against Power 5 programs. Even when the season doesn't go great overall, they still open up and beat, Washington. They still go out and beat Washington State. They still go out and do these great things to open the season and give the fan base hope at the beginning of the year, at least, even if the end of the season isn't the undefeated seasons of the past. And Boise State seems to have slipped off of that, and that's true. But, Boise State has been plateauing for a while. They've been trending in a downward trajectory, which is part of the rise and fall of college football programs. I mean, look at how many rebuilds Alabama has had, and how many amazing years they've had, and how many dipped years they've had, and they've always seemed to come back up. Now, Boise State has ridden an amazing wave in its young FBS history, had more success than any other young FBS program in its first, since 1996, so its first 27 years of FBS history. But all programs go through divots. Now, hopefully the divot is small and Boise State starts moving back in the upward direction. But remember, before Boise State went and won the Fiesta Bowl in 2006, they had one of their worst years in their young FBS history in 2005, where they lost 4 games. So Boise State opened up 0-2. They are playing an FCS opponent, a chance to maybe get back up, but you've got to look at Boise State in the grand scheme of things. Everyone's saying, "Oh, Boise State's gone. It's over. We're headed downhill, and there's no stopping the car, and they need to fire all the coaching staff." And that is such an overreaction at this point. It's the third year of this coaching staff. You would like to see some results start ticking back up, but remember, it is also the only third year, and it is the first year with this new offensive coordinator after changes were made in year 2. So it's not the same staff. They don't have all of their players on the roster yet. Boise State's still rebuilding. They still have a lot of guys that were on the team in 2021 that Andy Avalos has worked with and developed. So this is not the complete new program that we're going to see, that I think we're going to see in 2024. This is a Boise State team that is still building the platform for future success. Now, 0-2 is not the start you want to see, but Boise State has gotten better in each of those games. Washington, of course, not the result Boise State fans wanted, but they came out versus UCF and they made improvements, and they almost won that game. Yes, a couple of deflected interceptions would have made the game completely different if the UCF receivers had caught it. But also, if the UCF receivers had caught those touchdowns, Boise State might have responded differently, and the final score may still have ended up being that close. The end result that we saw was 16-18, with UCF winning on a last-second 50-50 shot field goal, and Boise State was this close to walking away with one of the biggest wins on the blue in school history. So Boise State is moving in the right direction. Their offense made adjustments that were necessary. The defense made adjustments that were necessary. Were mistakes still made? Yes, but Boise State is continuing to build towards success. It's not time to hit the panic button yet. I will let you know when it's time to hit the panic button. I'm not a continual blue goggle glasses, glass half full kind of guy. I always do. I look at the big picture. And if the big picture tells me that there's something to be worried about, I point it out. Boise State lost to San Jose State. before Brian Harsin made the announcement that he was going to be leaving the program, I laid it all out there. I did 30-plus minute videos, and I talked about why Boise State lost that Mountain West Championship and the issues with the program. And then when Boise State lost to UTEP, I talked about all the issues that were going on with that program, what Boise State needed to do to save it, and I was very, very straightforward. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to jump on and react after a loss that hurts, but in the moment, in the small picture, and react against the players and the coaches and just blast people. I'm going to look at what is the constructive issues? What can we do to get better? And in the grand scheme of things, we're 2 games into the season with a new offensive coordinator who made major changes after week 1. Boise State's offense that we saw versus UCF was completely different than what we saw versus Washington. Of course there were going to be hiccups. Of course it wasn't going to be consistent because Boise State's offense was not what they did with week 1, so the players were having to develop and adjust to a new offense, basically. They made the adjustments that were necessary. You all called for them. I called for them, and the coaching staff responded to the issues that were there and came up with a new game plan. That shows a coaching staff that is moving in the right direction, a coaching staff that has the right priorities, a coaching staff that has control of their own egos, that they can look at mistakes and say, we're not going to keep pushing what didn't work. We're going to try and get better. Boise State completely reversed their offensive game plan. So their game versus UCF was basically a week 1 matchup because it was completely new offense. And of course, you weren't going to see consistency and struggles. The Boise State defense, they got blown out versus Washington. They couldn't stop the deep ball. Versus UCF, one deep pass was not a touchdown. One deep pass, a second deep ball that would have been a touchdown if it was caught by the wide receiver. But that's it. Other than that, Boise State did a great job of locking down the deep ball. Yes, they struggled with the intermediate pass. They let some third down catches that shouldn't have happened happen, which led to a successful field goal attempt by UCF. But in the grand scheme of things, Boise State moved in the right direction. They saw new players step up. They just need to gel, and they'll move in the right direction and continue to get better and build towards a successful season and a successful 2024. We have to remember that this season is great. We want Boise State to do well, but 2024, every group of 5 team right now is building towards 2024. So 2023 is kind of like a prequel for 2024. It's all connected. Boise State just needs to continue to put themselves in the right position, build towards 2024, and have a chance to then go out and compete for the playoffs. We want them to have a great year. I think they can still have a great year. If Boise State gets back on, wins this FCS game, wins their Mountain West opener, wins against Memphis, and then goes into the Mountain West and wins those games all the way through, this could be a Boise State team that is in conversation for the New Year's Six at the end of the year. But at the same time, this is a Boise State team that at the end of the day, they're focused on a Mountain West championship and winning a bowl game. Those are their 2 goals, and both of those are completely within their grasp, regardless of what happens with the New Year's Six. So Boise State is completely focused and able to go out and achieve its season objectives, and fans need to take a step back and realize that you cannot be the top number 1 golden program every single year. Sometimes you go through a few seasons of rebuilds before you get a chance to go lift up the New Year's Six trophy or the playoff trophy at the end of the road. Sometimes you go through a 2005 before you get a chance to go through a 2006. And you have to stick with the coaching staff, you have to stick with the players, and you have to build towards that ultimate goal, ultimate success. Now, I'm not saying stick at all costs. I will, if Boise State continues this downward trajectory and there are continuing issues and Boise State doesn't adjust and doesn't develop and doesn't get better, you're going to hear me point those out. But Boise State is making the changes that need to happen. They're just some things that still need to be changed. And Boise State's going to identify those. And I think we're going to see a different team that takes the field versus North Dakota. Now, I also will point out that when Boise State loses a game, I'm going to tend to be a little more positive because we all know there's an issue. We all know there's a problem. We're focused on the negative. We are sucked into that. And I want us to be looking big picture. I want us to look at the positives that happened and that can be continued into the next matchup while also pulling out the negatives. I'm not going to ignore the negatives, but I'm going to highlight the positives because they're probably being missed. And when Boise State wins a game while being focused on the positives, I'm also going to be a little bit more focused on the negatives because there are things that may be overlooked if we're looking at the immediate picture and not on what can Boise State do to make sure that they get better the next game. So Boise State versus UCF versus Washington, not the matchups fans wanted, but there were positives to pull from them. And if you look at the big picture, Boise State is moving in the right direction. So enough. I'm going to get off my soapbox now. It's time to focus on this matchup. Boise State versus North Dakota. We're going to go through the series history between these two teams. There's not much. It's the first time meeting, but we'll go through series history, the key players for Boise State and for North Dakota, and we'll also talk about the keys of the game for Boise State, what Boise State needs to do to win this game in the right way. Of course, as always, I want to hear your score predictions, so make sure you go and you throw them in the comments section, and we'll discuss them, and I want to hear your perspective as well, so make sure you put that in. And then I'll also go through a game summary at the end and talk about my score prediction at the end of this video, so make sure you stick around all the way to the end. So Boise State versus North Dakota. This is the first game in the series history, Boise State and North Dakota never meeting, so a chance for Boise State to not just start off the season the right way here with a first win, finally, of the season, but also a chance for Boise State to start off this series history the right way with finally getting a win, or for starting off the season with it, finally getting a win for the season and starting off the series history with a 1-0 matchup. Now, key players for Boise State, you've heard me say Taylor Green the previous two times. And while he is obviously a key player, I'm going to focus on a different set of key players here because I think there's some guys that aren't living up to their full potential yet that need to have a chance to step up, whether it's because of the scheme, offensive, defensively, or because it's because of those players, what they put out in the field so far. These players, if they can step up and have a big game for Boise State, that might give Boise State something to latch onto and build forward for success the rest of the season. So key player number one for me is the wide receiver Eric McAllister. Right now he's second overall in wide receivers, right behind Stephon Cobbs. Third overall in receiving because Ashton Jeanty is leading the team with over 200 yards receiving. But right now, 9 out of 95, 9 receptions, 95 yards, 0 touchdowns, long of 19. Remember, this was the burnout guy last year. This was the guy you sent on the long passes, had all the long receptions, and he's been targeted a couple of times and hasn't quite been able to bring it in. Last week versus UCF, almost a one-handed catch on the sideline, ruled incomplete. It was this close to being an incredible catch. But so far, he's been targeted the most on the team, and he is right behind Stephon Cobbs. Both of those guys are stepping up big, but Boise State needs Eric McAllister to take over. Boise State is still searching for that number one wide receiver, that Khalil Shakir, Matt Miller, Spurbeck, Titus Young, whatever, that number one wide receiver that Boise State has always had. They're looking for that guy to rise up. And Eric McAllister really seems to fit the bill. He got the most targets. He really seems like they're trying to push him as that number one. But right now, because of the offense, Boise State's running, the inability sometimes of Taylor Green to find Eric McAllister, or there were some drops in that first game as well, it hasn't quite materialized. If Eric McAllister can take over in the way that he knows he can, and we know he's capable of, this could be a Boise State team that could start to develop the deep ball, that could start to be much more efficient in the passing game, and start to force defenders to focus in on Eric McAllister here and draw defenders away from other wide receivers and give other wide receivers a chance to shine. Boise State needs that number one wide receiver to step up, not just so that Boise State can go out and have the big plays, but also so that they can then use to shape their offense, knowing that defenders will be focused on this number one guy. It will let everyone on the roster have a chance to step up and succeed if Eric McAllister can shine the way that he knows he's capable of. And I think Boise State is this close to bursting him out because they've been trying to push that deep ball to him, and it hasn't quite worked. And I think we're going to see a chance versus maybe a weaker FCS secondary to start making some of those connections, start building those reps, and that confidence from the passing game position from Taylor Green and from Eric McAllister. Second key player for me is going to be running back Ashton Jeanty. He has taken over this offense. He has the most offensive yards of any Boise State player, 365 total yards, 159 rushing, 206 receiving, 3 total touchdowns, 1 rushing, 2 receiving. He is becoming the player that we all knew he was going to. As soon as he stepped foot on campus, everything was out that he was, had Doug Martin-esque body, that he was looking like a RB1. We all saw the photos that were, put out by the Idaho Statesman or by Bronco Nation News. And then he started popping out in the spring game, and then on the field, we knew he was going to be great, and he proved that in his freshman season. Now, George Halani's been out for, a couple of games here after the Washington game and now after the UCF game, and Ashton Jeanty's had that chance to shine. Now, we need George Halani back. We need to have that double running back system that makes this Boise State offense so special, but right now, Genty is taking every advantage. Boise State needs to continue to feed him as much as possible, more in the running game, but also continue to feed him in the passing game, because wherever he's become that number one threat that defenses have to focus on. If Eric McAllister can also become that level of receiver for Boise State, and you're now having to focus on Genty and McAllister level receiver players, it's going to be a tough time on defense. So Boise State, Ashton Genty, Eric McAllister, my top two key players for Boise State. I think today or this weekend versus an early game at 10 a.m. Mountain Central Time, a time for them to eat on against the defense to get that breakfast versus this North Dakota FCS program. I think Boise State is going to really want to push both of them. I think there's a chance for both these players to have a huge day. My last key player for Boise State on defense here is going to be defensive end Dimitri Washington. This is another player who, similar to Eric McAllister, there's a lot of expectations coming into the year. And Ron Council and I were really, really hyped about Dimitri Washington being able to kind of replace Matlock as that main guy on the defensive line, that star figure for Boise State. You know, Skinner and Matlock both leaving, a chance to take over as that star storied player for Boise State. He's a team captain for the program. His face is on the banner hanging from the stadium. And he's played hard. I mean, I think he had 62 reps versus UCF. You know that he's going out and giving his heart and soul, but it hasn't quite materialized yet statistically. 7 tackles, 1 tackle for loss, 0 sacks, but he is the only defensive lineman in the top 11 for tackles for Boise State. So it's a defensive line that right now is struggling to make the presence known on the defensive side of the ball, make the presence that I thought they would have the potential to, with so many fresh faces available through the transfer portal to be able to be rotated in here and to keep the defensive line fresh. I think that this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for Dimitri Washington versus, again, an FCS line that is going to be outmatched by this Boise State defensive line, a chance to explode. We've all been waiting since he stepped onto campus to have that breakout a monster season, and he's been waylaid by some injuries. This year, he's fully healthy. He's the leader. He's the one that everyone's looking up to, and this is a chance for him to step up big in this matchup versus an FCS program that there's going to be some opportunities against, and we need him to have that big game because this is an FCS program that likes to throw the ball around, and it's a secondary by Boise State that's still struggling to stop that. This is a Boise State defensive line that has a chance to make a big statement, to build some momentum for the season, to light a fire that burns and carries Dimitri Washington to Mountain West, one of the top Mountain West defensive players of the year. This is the game that I think we see that spark. So my top 3 players, 2 of them, a lot of potential, but neither of them have quite lit that fire yet. A chance for Eric McAllister and Dimitri Washington to reach their full potential in this game and carry it through the rest of the season. And then Ashton Genty, who's already living up to that full potential to continue to burn brightly and run through this North Dakota defense. Now, on the North Dakota side, they have some top players here that Boise State definitely needs to look out for. They're 2-0. Yes, it's against FCS programs, but they are 2-0, and that is something to be taken seriously. They have a great quarterback here in Tommy Schuster. You know, his physical stats don't pop off the board, 6 foot, 195 pounds, but his performance on the field does. 43 out of 56, 521 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and only 1 sack allowed on the season through 2 games. Now again, this Boise State defensive line, or defense overall, that has struggled to get after the quarterback. And this is a offensive line for North Dakota that so far has allowed their quarterback only 1 sack on the entire season, and he's been incredibly accurate. He's only missed 13 times with 0 picks. So Boise State's secondary is going to be tested. Hopefully, again, it's a Boise State secondary that continues to improve and is going up against an FCS opponent that maybe doesn't have the depth to continue to fight through the whole matchup. But this quarterback is going to be able to test Boise State. He's going to be right there as one of the top threats that Boise State has faced in the early part of the season. For the wide receiver here for North Dakota, their main guy who's catching most of those yards is Bo Belquist, 6'1", 185 pounds. On 15 receptions, he has 233 yards, for an average of 15.5 yards per catch and 2 touchdowns. They are burning the defenders that they're coming up against. Like I said, only 15 catches, but 233 yards. Now, another player to look out for is running back Gavin Zybart, 6 foot, 205 pounds. Again, he doesn't really pop off the screen here physically, but he's able to perform on the field. He hasn't been given a lot of touches, only 19 so far, but he has made the most of them. He is averaging 9.5 yard average per carry. He has 2 touchdowns and 181 yards. So this is a big play team. This is a team that has the capability to get yardage in chunks and to burn a defense. And Boise State needs to make sure that, anytime you play an FCS opponent, you do not want to allow the momentum. Boise State does not want to give this North Dakota program a chance to develop momentum and a feeling that they are in this game through some early big play strikes. Now, keys to the game for Boise State. Key number 1, I've mentioned it already, is fix the secondary. Spencer Danielson, he got a huge raise over the offseason, and he's now the highest paid coordinator for Boise State, and he's one of the highest paid defensive coordinators Boise State's ever had. They're really putting the money into keeping these guys and into paying them close to or what they are worth. So Boise State, Spencer Danielson, he needs to step up and earn that massive raise that he got. He's done a good job of transforming this Boise State defense. This was a Boise State defense that was really struggling in 2020, and when he came over and took over in 2021, he increased the turnover numbers dramatically. He increased some of that consistency throughout, and Boise State's done a pretty good job under him of stopping teams between the 20s. Or not in the red zone, allowing yards between the 20s, but not letting those yards lead to points. And versus UCF, while Boise State did get burned a lot, yardage-wise, over 500 yards of offense by UCF, they were good in their key situations. They forced 2 turnovers in the red zone, and they were big coming up against third downs. 4 out of 10 on third downs allowed by UCF against UCF, and 0 for 1 on fourth down. So Boise State good in the key moments, but they need to put together more consistency throughout. Whether that is mixing up the scheme, whether that's mixing up the players, this is really your last kind of tune-up game, your last chance to get the guys that you want on the field and figure out what that scheme needs to look for before you start to hit the point in the season where it's going to be too late if you haven't fixed it by then. A secondary, unlike the defensive line, a secondary, you need to have your set guys. The defensive line, you can kind of rotate players through and give lots of players opportunity to go out and try and, use them in different scenarios where you're a blitz package, or maybe it's more of a cover package, and rotate guys through and keep them fresh, kind of like running backs. But with the secondary, you need to have consistency there. You need to have a set position of guys that are going to be out there for the majority of the game, because so much of the secondary is dependent on trusting the guys behind you and knowing who's behind you and being and being on the same page with those other defenders out there with you, whether it be the safety or corner or nickel, making sure that you're all on the same page together, and that comes from being a unit that is used to playing together. Boise State, 3rd game of the season here, a chance to tune up and continue to fix. We saw some new faces versus UCF. Ty Bensfield stepped up, had a great game there for Boise State at safety, and there's a chance to mix in some new guys. We haven't seen Titus Toliar yet, so maybe there's a chance to get him involved in the defense. Figure out those players. If it's a scheme issue so far, if it's a player issue, fixes were made that prevented the issues that happened against Washington, but it still hasn't been fixed all together. Boise State's still allowing far too many completions, far too many key completions on third down. Something needs to continue to change here, and this is really kind of your last chance to get your tinkering done before you enter into the meat of the season, coming up against your first conference opponent next week versus San Diego State, and then a huge non-conference game versus Memphis before you're into the rest of the conference stretch there. So this is your last chance to fix secondary, and you need to do it not just for the sake of the season, but for the sake of this team, because Boise State, for the sake of this game, because Boise State is going to be facing a team that is going to attack you through the air. This is not going to be one of your easy roll over and die FCS programs. This is going to be an FCS program that's going to come out slinging at Boise State's weakest spot, and they need to find the plugs to fix these holes in the secondary before Boise State gets too much further into the season here. Key number 2, find your offensive identity. We saw an air raid style versus Washington, and we saw a balanced run-heavy attack versus UCF. I think the move towards the balanced run-heavy attack was the right one. We saw more of Taylon Green's legs used in the running game. We saw more of a focus of running it on first down. Now, Boise State still needs to figure out how to create creative play calling in the running game and mix it up in the running game so they're not just plowing up the middle, because that really wasn't working. But we did see more of an emphasis on the running game, and that's what Boise State needs to keep doing. However, whatever Boise State's going to do going forward, whether it's more with that balanced run attack that I would like to see, or if it's more of a focus on the passing game, Boise State needs to find the offensive identity and stick to it in this game and going through the rest of the season. I'm not saying you can't tinker your offense to match up against your opponent's weaknesses. You're always going to see that give and take with the offense. But at its core, the offense needs to have an identity that they know that they're good at. They know what's going to happen, and they're used to running. And Boise State's offense so far has run two completely different programs, which is why we've seen the hiccups so far in the first two games. First game hiccups in two different matchups because they ran two different offenses. Boise State, I think, found the system that works. They just need to build the consistency. This is your chance. Boise State needs to run that all the way throughout the game. No mixing it up in the second half to slow the clock down or to burn out the time, to kick sand until the end of the game if you've got the lead. Boise State needs to get these players used to this, gelling, and that means running it full speed from beginning all the way to end, which will lead right into key number 3, which is that Boise State needs to destroy North Dakota. They need to run that offense smoothly and correctly all the way throughout the entire game. Don't start mixing off to just straight handoffs in the second half to burn out the clock, because Boise State has not established consistent offense yet on this team. There's going to be a lot of players that on this depth chart that are going to need to see the field as Boise State continues to work on what works in the wide receiver room, as Boise State continues to run a run-heavy attack. So you're going to see a lot of different running backs cycle through, especially if injuries continue to rack up. Boise State needs their second-string guys like, Braxton Burmeister ready to step up and run the offense smoothly and efficiently through if something happens to the starters like we saw versus UCF. Braxton Burmeister did a great job stepping up and doing that. Boise State needs to make sure that all of their players on this roster are capable of stepping up and doing that, because like we've seen so far with attrition in the running room, you never know where injuries are going to start racking up. So Boise State, yes, at some point start substituting your players if you've been able to acquire that lead, but don't change the offense. Keep running the same offense all the way through to get all of these players familiar with the system. But not just for that reason, Boise State needs the signature win. They need those style points versus North Dakota. This is a program that's off to its worst start since 2005. It's a team that lost on the blue in a very devastating way with that last-second field goal. There is a lot of angst and negativity in the fan base, and you can see on the faces of these players, they don't have that same, they don't have that same indestructible look that we're used to seeing in Boise State players, because they haven't been so far. They're 0-2. Now, they're playing with a lot of energy. They're playing with a lot of fire and passion. And talking to them after the game, they are taking this in stride. They're taking it in the right way. They're saying, okay, yes, they were good. We improved on some things. They had more opportunities, and we need to keep building and getting better. They're not giving up, but they need a signature win to fire them up and build up that momentum that they can ride throughout the rest of the season. That needs to happen in this matchup. Boise State needs the win that says, you know what, those first two games of the season, that's over with. We're not looking back. We're moving forward. We're resetting the clock right now. We're resetting the record on the blue. We're resetting the season, and we're building towards something else. And the rest of the teams on our schedule better look out, because we're playing with a chip on our shoulder, and we are coming after you. And that starts with this win versus North Dakota. Boise State needs to get a massive win versus North Dakota to reset the passion in the fan base here, to reset that positivity in the fan base and get fans looking towards the future here, and to fire up this team and build a momentum for the rest of the season. So for Boise State, fix the secondary, not just for the season, but because this game is going to test you if that secondary doesn't get fixed. Find your offensive identity. You've shown two different faces. Pick one and build on it and destroy North Dakota. Foot to the pedal all the way through. Don't stop. Don't start looking back until the clock hits 0. Boise State needs scores 0-0 all the way, and Boise State needs to be driving to score a touchdown every single drive until there's like 30 seconds on the clock, and then whatever, take knees if you want to. But Boise State needs that quality signature standout win to rebuild the passion in this program, to rebuild the identity of this program, and put Boise State back on track to building towards what can still be a strong, successful season for Boise State. So summary for Boise State, they're getting better. They are. Defensively, offensively, they had, drops were a huge problem versus Washington. They didn't have those versus UCF. Slipping on the turf was a huge problem versus Washington. We didn't see much of that versus UCF. Defensively, they were giving up all these deep balls versus Washington. They stopped that for the most part versus UCF. There's some new problems that cropped up, but overall, blowout loss, close loss that could have gone either way. Boise State is moving in the right direction. So I think you're going to see a Boise State team that comes out angry, that comes out with a need to win to start the season off right, that comes out and blows a UCF program that is a good one. That's a good FCS team, and I think that they're going to see them hang with Boise State maybe early. But I think Boise State is going to catch fire in the second half. UCF's not going to have the depth, and Boise State is going to make the corrections that they need to come out and win this game decisively. My final score prediction is Boise State 42, North Dakota 20, and at least a 3-possession win for Boise State, as I alluded to on my Twitter when I gave a little bit of a hint of what I was going to be looking at in this matchup. So, Boise State, a chance to start the season right. You're always starting off, when you lose, you put that in the back of your mind, and you're starting off 0-0 that week. So Boise State, a chance to get that first win of the year, and hopefully a win that snowballs into a successful season the rest of this year, but also gives Boise State something to build on for 2024. This is their opportunity to start off the season the right way. Thanks so much for watching this video. As you can see, I've got a new mic. This thing, which I don't know how many of you realized this all along, was actually fake. Just a prop, really. I realized my audio is definitely something I need to improve as Boise State does continue to try and improve their team overall. I try to improve the quality of these videos, and so I got this new mic. Hopefully you enjoyed the quality, slightly increased quality of the audio overall, and hopefully a little bit crisper for you there. I'm going to try to continue to improve that as we go throughout. So thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Keep sticking with this team. They're building towards something special. And as always, go Big Blue!